All right. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tim. I'm one of the second year GI fellows at UCSF Fresno. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our monthly installment of our webinar series. I'm just going to be going through a few housekeeping slides briefly before I introduce our speaker tonight. So these are just the objectives for the talk tonight. Just as a reminder for everyone that's attending, if you could please mute your microphone to make sure that we can hear the speaker. And then we encourage everybody to also enable their video to make this a little bit more interactive. If there are any questions at any point during the talk, you can feel free to post them in the chat below, and then we can go over them at the end. For anybody that wants to claim CME, these are the instructions here. And then if you do want to obtain CME, you will have to complete the sort of a pre-test, post-test and evaluation, and the instructions are here for the online evaluation form. And then for any fellows that are attending tonight, just a reminder that there is the NCSCG will reimburse you for up to $30 for a meal. So we encourage everybody to order some dinner and participate. Thank you for the following sponsors for their educational grants. And then, so on the left is our lecture tonight, and just coming up, we do have monthly talks. And this is just a preview of what is to come in the following months. And just a special thanks to the rest of my co-fellows that are a part of this committee from all the other various institutions in Northern California, as well as our faculty committee chairs. And just a reminder as a save the date, so our 18th annual GI Symposium is scheduled for June 26th and 27th in Monterey. It will tentatively be a sort of hybrid symposium, meaning there will be some in-person events and people should also be able to tune in virtually as well. And follow us on social media. All right. And so I have the privilege of introducing our speaker tonight, Dr. Leif Haas. So Dr. Haas is currently a hospitalist at Alta Bates Medical Center. He originally did his medical school at McGill University in Canada and went on to complete his family medicine residency at UCSF. Before joining Alta Bates as part of their hospitalist program, where he has been there since. He also serves as a preceptor for the UCSF and UC Berkeley Joint Medical Program and is a regular contributor to various publications such as Greater Good Magazine. He actually also recently published an article in the SF Chronicle detailing his experience working with taking care of COVID patients. So thank you, Dr. Haas, for being here. Yep. I think, let me, okay, now you're unmuted.
Okay, share my screen, let's see. Okay, does that look good, guys?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, good, there's a dog that makes me happy. My dog may bark too. So in late December, I was walking down the hall of my hospital feeling totally worn out and wondering how I was going to make it through the rest of this pandemic. And I walked into the room to see this woman named Mrs. K. And so at this point, she was 68, rail thin, and she'd been admitted for shortness of breath the night before. And she was exhausted when I saw her. She'd barely slept. And I started talking to her about why she came to the hospital, or short of breath, this metastatic cancer she had. But the conversation quickly moved to a more philosophical one. And she said to me, between coughs, well, Dr. Haas, this was the year I lost my leg during the spring lockdown. And now it looks like I'm losing this battle to this lung cancer, all on top of all this COVID stress and isolation. I never thought life could be so hard. But I learned some things too. We all need each other, and everyone, we all need some love. And when she said this frail woman all of a sudden looked bigger. The room, the gloom in the room lifted. And I felt like, wow, look at this woman here. And I said, thank you for reminding me of that. I think we all learned something from this year. We need to figure out how to incorporate what we've learned going forward. Where do I go here? How do I advance my slides? So 2020, right, was 2020. I heard it called a dumpster fire. And this is a great picture here, a dumpster fire with, I think that's Pence there looking at it. People talked about it as a world turned upside down. I heard that, unprecedented. But I'm trying to take my cue from Miss K and say this was a world revealed. A world where it was revealed what it is to be human in relationships, what it is to be human in community, and what it is to be human on this planet. So human in relationships, the one thing I think we've all learned is that people need people, right? There's one thing we learned is people need to be around people. And, seeing folks on Zoom is just not the same. I have a monthly meeting and I can't wait to see my people and be able to touch them and be in their presence. And so we need to figure out, we need to value our relationships. And we need to be human in community. Our institutions, we learned this not just from COVID, but from our political processes and our, that these institutions, they exist mostly in our imaginations. There may be like a Capitol or a Department of Justice or a police station, but unless people believe in the institutions, the buildings don't stand for anything. And I think a lot of us have taken for granted a lot of the institutions in our society, like that they will exist even if we neglect them. And I think it's incumbent on us to not just believe in them, but do what we can to strengthen our community by engaging in institutions that we can. I think we're all lucky because we get to work with these really important institutions, these healthcare institutions, really important. So we are lucky in that way to be engaged in that way. And we learned what it is to be human on this planet. Who's ever going to forget that October day? Like, who else was not from the Bay Area? But this day in October is a Wednesday when the sky was orange all day and the sun never came out. Like, if that was not a wake-up call about taking care of the planet, I'm not sure we're going to have one. That was like waking up to this apocalyptic movie. And so we just need to think about how we relate to our environment as well. So how do we move forward, given all our recent shortcomings, the way we've come up short? We've learned a lot, but I think a lot of what I learned was just the school of hard knocks. I mean, we learned not what to do, but I don't think I had a lot of strategies at the end of last year, what we need to do differently, just that weren't doing a good job. And so I've come up with a list of some things after doing some reading and talking to some experts in the field about what can we do moving forward. And here's some concepts I think we should cultivate to enhance our well-being as providers and as individuals and just as decent human beings. So humility, compassion, awe, purpose, and love are all things that I'm going to be talking about here. And I think are all worth our consideration. Humility. I think another thing we can clearly say is we were humbled biologically by the virus and socially as well, right? And I think a lot of our institutions were humbled by this year. And as it turns out, this is something I was not really aware of, but that being humble is a good thing. But in medicine, we don't get to where we are by being humble, right? Like, we get to where we are by being smart and raising our hands when called upon. And our patients, they want someone who knows the answers and will be strong and go there and do that. So it's not an easy transition to think about humility in the work that we do. But humility can be learned. In fact, there's this whole industry of like learning how to take people who are in leadership positions and teach them humility. And it's something actually I've seen myself, is that over the years, the people I've run into in leadership positions have become increasingly thoughtful, the kind of Machiavellian guy who pounds his fist on the table. But we don't see those guys running hospitals or medical organizations much anymore. And what you learn, humility can be learned by the first thing you do is really own up our own humanity, our own humanness. We're flawed, we make mistakes, and we work best working in groups. And the other thing we need to do is just take the time to really listen. We all know the study, like 15 seconds after we start talking to a patient, we interrupt them, right? I try to sometimes count to 20 before I interrupt. So, but taking the time to listen in any setting we're in is a good way to develop some humility, and just questioning our own assumptions. We tend to think we're right, and often we are, but just to question our assumptions before we jump to our answers. And if you recognize the work of others, is a great way to develop humanity and express our gratitude, thanking those people who came before us and have been helping us out. None of us would be here if it weren't for our work of our parents, our mentors through our educational process, and even now, right? We've got great skill, but you wouldn't. No one here would have invented the endoscope on their own, right? We're all sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. So the benefits of humility are something that I didn't quite realize, that the people who have learned to be more humble find that they go easier on themselves. If they make a mistake, they're not so hard. They're less of perfectionists. Being humble makes us teachable, which improves our performance in all kinds of ways. It makes us more grateful if we start to think we are not the ones responsible for everything, and see the work of others. And there's a whole list of benefits of gratitude. And when you are humble, it connects you to other people. No one likes the arrogant butthead, right? If you're the nice guy who thanks the nursing staff, thanks their coworkers, it connects us to people in a really healthy way. Compassion. I think one of the amazing things about the pandemic, I think I wasn't the only one to have that feeling, but there was a time about a year ago when you just sensed the whole world was feeling the suffering of everybody else. And like we were all sort of stuck, like, wow, all these people are really suffering. All the people stuck at home and people fearful, and you could see people's compassion activate across the world. So compassion is witnessing the suffering of another and moving to relieve that suffering. So it's a two-part process. It's witnessing the suffering and then moving to relieve it. And we saw that across the world. Sometimes all people could do was stand on their balconies and cheer, but they felt like they were trying to do something to help out the people that needed help. And so some people are left to just cheering from their balconies, but we get to act on our compassion every day, right? That's our job, witnessing this. I mean, who here did see suffering today? Like, if you're doing this work, you're seeing suffering and you're moving to relieve that suffering. So why aren't we like up to our armpits in these feelings of compassion for doing this work, right? And I want to spend a minute talking about that. This is what I've written about and I've called the healthcare compassion paradox. That if we fail to take a moment to witnessing the suffering of our patients, we don't feel this natural movement to be compassionate, right? You kind of like you walk in the room like, okay, this sounds like this is you got a common bile duct stone, or, oh, and this is another IBS case. When you walk in the room with a diagnosis and, you're like ready to book them for their next appointment or whatever happens, you're not going to you're not going to feel that compassion. It takes a moment to do that. So rushing to the answer is part of the problem. You may know the answer, but you need to still take a second to slow down, take a deep breath. You can feel this pull of compassion much more if you're out of the sympathetic nervous system and moved into the parasympathetic nervous system, if that makes sense. Right. So if you're slow down, you're this relatable form of the nervous system, you can hear your patient's stories and you can feel it in your body. Like, oh, I want to help. And when that happens, when you move to help people and you do the work, right? The dopaminergic system is activated, and the reward system is there to reward us and make us feel good, right? We've needed to help each other. Human beings would never survive in isolation. I could see myself in the plains of Serengeti, wouldn't get very far, right? I might last a day. Evolution has put things in place that we feel good when we help other people. Because if we don't help other people, we're not going to make it, right? So when we act in compassionate ways and we get in there and do it, there's this neurological reward that happens that reinforces this behavior. And this is what's called the virtuous cycle of compassion, right? We all know the downward spirals we get into. There are these virtuous spirals that take us upward, where you start with witnessing the suffering, alleviating the suffering, and then you feel energized by that act, right? And you seek more opportunities to do good. Right, all know that feeling, right? When you're doing the real work, right? You walk out of your patient's room like, man, I love this work, right? That's what we want more of. And this is what happens, right? This one probably wasn't smiling when she came in, and this person here may not have been smiling as well, but this is what's going on. And we all know this feeling, right? Walking out of the room when you've seen your patient, it's like you're floating on air. Like, man, I love this work. And so compassion can turn suffering into positive energy for us. There's this idea that if we open ourselves up to our patients, we're going to get burned out. The reason you burn out is if you don't activate the compassion in you don't move to operationalize the feelings that you have. You can get burned out because you work too much. You can be worked out because you're running into some butt heads and the EHR sucks, but you're not going to get burned out by engaging with your patients. In fact, there's a whole bunch of data about this. The compassion can be learned and you can feel it more intensely. The first work on studying compassion was that this guy at Wisconsin, Richie Davison, who is a pretty amazing guy. He got some people who worked with the Dalai Lama to come to his lab in Wisconsin, and they showed a whole range of people, including these guys, short videos of things. And when the people who were trained had spent many years, the thing about the Buddhists is they've been thinking about suffering for a long time. And that's sort of that understanding suffering and compassion is sort of fundamental to that philosophy. It's not really a religion, it's more of a philosophy. And so they spent time training their brains in how to understand suffering and compassion. And what they found is that when they showed people images of a child in distress, these on functional MRIs, these areas would light up way bigger than the average person when they would witness his suffering. But when they showed the next slide of a bland scene, that these areas of activation in their body with these sensors on their skin and checking their heart rate, as well as the fMRIs, all showed that they returned to a baseline in a much sooner. So developing compassion not only makes you feel more compassion, but it also helps you cool down and there's greater resilience if you become skilled as a compassionate provider. And now there are many interventions. There's a whole science of compassion in healthcare, and there's some programs as few as a couple hours where people can have measurably higher levels of compassion a couple months down the road. There are programs that last a lot longer, but it's a practice that can be learned. And compassion is good for providers and patients. there's a book came out a couple of years ago, Compassionomics, by they're like health policy guys. They're not like wonky social scientists. These are guys who are healthcare bottom dollar guys, saying that if when providers are more compassionate, they have less burnout, and when providers are compassionate, their patients have better outcomes. And so developing your compassion is both good for you and good for patients. And I just will say again that this is why we do our work, and figuring out how to activate our compassion will give us that feeling that we love about our work. And it's a teachable skill. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't get to the Grand Canyon last year. I mean, I think mostly I saw the 3 miles between my house and work, back and forth on my bicycle, right? There was not a lot of this. And I didn't make it to Paris, I actually had plans to travel. It fell through. There was not a lot of this kind of awe either. So awe is the feeling we get in the presence of something vast or beautiful that challenges our understanding of the world. Right. So it's that feeling like, wow. And when it does, so when something does this, it provokes this sense of awe, something that's beautiful or just hard to get our brains around. It enlivens us. And that's what we depend on, right? That's why people go on vacation. It's just to be like, wow, you see things you haven't seen before, makes you feel alive, gives you energy. And so last year was not a great year for awe for a lot of folks, right? Interestingly, my friend and colleague did the study, Dr. Keltner is his name, and he's at UC Berkeley. And he did a study with some folks in geriatrics at UCSF. And it was done in 2018, but it came out in 2020. And what they did is they randomized 100 older adults to take a vigorous exercise walk, or they randomized them and told them, like, I want you to walk a little slower, and I want you to take time to look at the things around you. Take a look at the trees and look at the things and take things in with a sense of curiosity. And what they found is that the people who did these awe walks reported a better sense of well-being. They felt more relaxed. They slept better. There were measurable outcomes from doing a walk where they actually took things in a different way. And the interesting thing is that they also had people take selfies in both groups, and they judged the quality of their smiles. There's researchers who can look at a good smile versus not a good smile, or they can read a lot into it. And they just found it confirmed what people reported themselves. And they also found that when people used the selfies, when they were doing the exercise walk, they filled up the whole screen. And as when they did the awe walk, they were smaller. They were thinking less about themselves, more thinking about the world around them. They were like, which is an interesting finding. And let me go on to the next slide. The thing about one of the great things about awe is it makes you think less about yourself, and you're less about your own importance and more about being part of something bigger. And awe can make you more generous, right? It makes you think less about yourself. This is another great study. This is UC Berkeley. There's this terrific eucalyptus grove, and this is the life science building here. And this is a brilliant study where this guy stood right between these two things. And he actually asked students walking up if they wanted to participate in a study. And it was really kind of a sham study. And he started talking, and then he dropped his pens. And if the people were looking at the trees, they were more likely to pick up the pens than if they were looking at the building. Right? Just looking at the trees made them more generous. And they were more generous in their time as well. Not just did they pick up the pens more likely, but so being in awe and the sense of wonder makes us more generous with our time, with our effort, and think less about ourselves, right? Get out of our stupid heads. So awe energizes us, enlivens us, makes us more humble, more generous, and less self-centered, right? You're going to see a theme here about humility, generosity, less self-centered. And you can activate this a number of ways, right? It's certainly best to, going to Grand Canyon, that's going to do it for sure. Going to Paris is gonna do it for sure, but boy, you can, if you watch a sunset from pretty much anywhere, that's pretty awesome. Even just sitting down, looking at a flower, looking at a tree. And for us, I mean, there's some awesome stories to be heard in the exam room, in the hospital room every day. I sit down and talk to some of the grandmas I take care of. Finding a way when there's no way for some of these people in these communities, really tough, raising their grandkids, lives full of trauma and violence. And that there's often an incredible amount of beauty and grace to some of these folks, right? So there are awesome stories out there. And people will tell us these stories. And we need to look for the beauty in our patients' lives. Is one of the things, the most important things if you leave this talk for, is look for the beauty in your patients' lives. And it will move you. It will make this work so much more meaningful. Purpose. Well, there wasn't a lot of awe, but man, was there a lot of purpose, right? We lived a life of purpose last year. I think we all live for this look here, right? You work with your patient, you're doing the work. They trust you. You make that connection. Man, that's what we live for. That's what I live for, the work I do. And this picture here, this was last year, right? Man, talk about a life of purpose. You're just waiting for danger to come to you, right? So purpose is the abiding intention to achieve long-term goals that is both personally meaningful and makes a positive mark on the world, right? Living a life of purpose. So our work is imbued with purpose and a sense of meaning. But again, it's just like compassion. We can lose sight of it, right? I'm sure everyone had the experience of saying, oh my God, I wish I were a doctor. I could help people. And, you do all this work, and we kind of like, yeah, I guess so. I kind of hadn't thought about that since I think like last time I thought about that was I was doing my application for fellowship or doing my application for residency, right? When you need to write about those things, right? It's so much of what we do, we lose sight of it. There's this phenomenon they talk about in psychology called hedonic adaptation, where basically you get used to things being good. We get used to our life having purpose. And I was suffering from some of that myself, and I've become friends with one of my patients, this kind of lovely guy who I met, who is a different world. He's a older African-American guy who is a Christian, and he texts me every couple of weeks. He'll get this kind of corny text like, have a great day on purpose. And I think, yeah, I'm gonna have a day, today's a day of purpose. I live a life of purpose. I go out there and serve my community. And it kind of gets you fired. It's kind of a roll up your sleeves kind of thing. It's not like a expansive heart thing, but having purpose is a good thing. In fact, it's this same friend of mine, Dr. Keltner, teaches this class, the science of happiness, and I sort of thought science of happiness, that's a simple formula, like a beach, a margarita, and some sun, right? There you go. That's the key to a happy life. But it turns out that a life well lived is a life with purpose. A sense of purpose is perhaps the most important factor in a meaningful life, right? And you can live a life of purpose, but if you're not aware of it, it's you're missing that it's low-hanging fruit and having a life well lived. So keeping a sense of purpose is go through our days is motivating us in the long term, and actually really will lead to the sense we've led a meaningful life. And so as I was saying, you need to reflect on our sense of purpose as we do our work, and maybe every once in a while, I'm not sure if you guys do rounds in the morning, but sort of talk about, hey, we're here to serve our community. Aren't we in a great position here to serve the people who've got serious health needs at this institution? It's good to talk to staff about. I think that really we can make the folks who work with us have a sense of purpose. It'll filter down to our patients, and our patients' experience will be better as well. So love, I kind of was going to leave this one off. I thought, oh my God, am I going to talk about love? How am I going to talk about love? But I sort of thought it's been a crazy year. I might as well just go for it here. And also, if like it's in the Bible, right? Love thy neighbor. you can't argue with the 10 Commandments, right? And all you need is love. The Beatles are kind of like demigods, if they can say it, and it must be some truth here. Love holds the world together. It's one of the foundational statements for the Baha'i faith. So, hard to argue about the importance of love. And I think we all weren't getting enough love last year. And as Miss Kay said, we all need a little love. I think part of the problem, though, is that that we see. I think we're uncomfortable with it for a number of reasons. That we don't talk about it much, and that love has this romantic connotations to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be there, right? I mean, love thy neighbor. There's some neighbors I might think have unhealthy thoughts about, but it's not. Most the love of their neighbors is an affectionate love, not a romantic love. And so this woman, Barbara Friedrichsen, who is Stanford trained and at Chapel Hill, a psychologist, wrote this book called Love 2.0, where she made a case for redefining the way we talk about love and not thinking about strictly as love that we feel only for the most intimate people in our lives. And she defines it as a moment-to-moment experience of warmth, mutual caring that we feel for anyone, even strangers in our everyday interactions. And that our minds evolve to look for these connections. And it's this broaden and build theory where we create a web of infection and concerns that creates the fabric of our culture and well-being. So it's through this love and concern and connection that we really create society and create culture. And that there's a lot of value to all the small relationships that we have throughout the day. The clerks you might run to the hospital, the people you see regularly at the store, all those folks, those relationships, as small as they may be, if some warmth and affection there goes a long way to, it's a value to us as in our individual well-being, but it also is what creates a healthy society and a healthy culture. So what do all these concepts have in common? Well, they lead us to have an open mind. They lead us to think less about ourselves. And they lead us to be open-hearted. And they lead us to think about making a better world, right? And that's kind of the lessons from 2020, right? We need to figure out how to take better care of each other, think more as a community, take better care of ourselves. So here are the cognitive states again. Humility, right? It's good to be humble. Humility makes us teachable. Compassion is, it's there in front of us every day. But if we rush to the solution, we miss that pull of compassion, that feel that makes us want to attend, and then later gives us this energizing desire to keep doing our work. In awe, this sense of wonder, this sense of our little petty grievances are not so important in the big picture. And then purpose, right? Living with a sense of purpose, that what we do matters and that we serve other people, and because that's what good human beings do. In love, right? We all need to cultivate the sense of concern and compassion for people around us. And that talking about that and spreading the love is the way to a better world. And not only do we need to be thinking about them for ourselves, but we need to be talking to our patients about them. This is so I started handing out these prescriptions, what I call prescriptions for health and happiness here. I actually did this a couple of years ago, but they've been a little different. I don't tell people to join the church choir right now. It's probably like the worst thing you want to do in COVID is be singing with a bunch of people. But this is a prescription I give to folks in the hospital. Get them out doing activities. Give someone a hug. Touch is good for us. Write a thank you note. That's gratitude. Sing in the shower, a little bit of joy. Dance. Go for a walk. That's some awe. Forgive someone. Call an old friend. Take a deep breath. So, I think if we take a broader look at at health and try to bring these cognitive skills and recommendations to our patients, we'd be doing a lot of good. So about 5 years ago, the chaplain at our med center, this great guy, Stevie, heard me talking about to my patients. I came out of the room and he said, I'm like an atheist, right? You know, and he's this Pentecostal or something like that. And he's like, I'm going to make a Christian out of you one day. He always jokes. And one day I walked out of this room. He said, Dr. Haas, your work is a spiritual practice. And I said, BS. Like, I'm a flag waving, card carrying atheist. I don't have a spiritual practice. What are you talking about, Stevie? And he kind of smiled. And then I saw him last July. And I walked out of the room. I was like in the brink of tears. I had this incredible conversation with his family. I said, Stevie, my work is a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice is the regular performance of actions and activities undertaken for the purpose of inducing spiritual experiences and cultivating spiritual development. And if talking to people about their cancers and talking to people about their pain and their worries, if that's not something that where you're connecting to someone's spirit, I'm not sure what is. And the thing about it is, it's a spiritual practice. It's a practice, right? You know, it's doesn't mean that it's a practice to get better at doing these things, right? You guys are all like, can I get around whatever in that some orifice on my ERCP, right? And how am I doing at my, you know, that's a practice, right? Can I see that, you know, pancreatic neoplasm on this MRI? Can I, you know, how am I doing it at my exam and my diagnostic? That's a practice. And so if we can think about our communication with our patients, developing a sense of wonder at their lives, greater sense of compassion, a sense of purpose of what we do, that is a spiritual practice we should be doing. It doesn't take any more time than we're doing. It's built into what we do. This, you know, that we have this, there's this cognitive or spiritual side of what we do, and we can develop that as we're working on our medical practice. So that's my challenge for you. You think, oh my God, maybe in 5 years you'll say, I think that guy might have been right. If you think it's BS right now, that's where I was for a long time. So back to Mrs. K. So she was in the hospital for about 4 days. She had a post-obstructive pneumonia, and she was a little immunocompromised from her chemo when she came in. We got her pneumonia cleared up. She wasn't walking well. Every day she was a little stronger, got on her feet. We kind of got her off oxygen. And when it was time for her to go home, she said, I sat down, she took my hand and said, Dr. Haas, I want to thank you so much. And I'm just glad that you're getting through 2020. And I said, well, I want to thank you, Miss Kay. You know, I've learned a lot from you. And I can tell you, my patients is going to get good medical care, but they're also going to get a little bit of love too. And that's my goal going forward, is to make sure that I, you know, get my patients a little love in addition to everything else I'm doing, make them feel cared for. And I can tell you, doing that, as I've been doing the last few months, really has brought a lot of wonder and joy and emotional richness to my life as well. So I encourage you guys to think about these 5 skills and try to incorporate them in your practice, in your life moving forward. Any thoughts or questions?
There are a few questions in the chat here. So the first one is, as we start to move into a recovery phase and things begin returning to normal, what are some strategies we can adopt or practice to continue experiencing the compassion, humility, and awe that we've learned during the pandemic?
Well, I think that if you just keep those words in your imagination as you go. People are going to want to, it's funny. My aunt said the highlight of 2020 for her is when she got a colonoscopy. It's like, oh my God, I hadn't seen anyone. I've been in the house for 9 months, and this woman, so people are ready to talk and to engage, and we can talk about real stuff with people, acknowledge the suffering they've been through, and talk about the joy of just being with each other.
Sorry, Dr. Haas, I think your microphone was cutting a little bit in and out there with some
Well,
static.
I would just say that if keeping these ideas in mind as you go, and I think, what did they say? It'd be never waste a good crisis. So what are ways that you want to be a better human being? How do you want to do a better job talking to your patients? How do we want the world to look going forward? Right. And so if we quickly get out of the habit and we get back to just the way things were, we've missed an opportunity. So we all need to be a little bolder and a little more, tell people that tell your friends you love them, and tell your patients that you really care, and you really, you treat them like family. And look at those sunsets and say, this is awesome. Wow. Yeah.
And then, do you have any recommendations on either seminars or retreats to learn more about implementing these concepts in our daily lives, both at work and at home?
Well, the Greater Good Science Center has an annual event. So for healthcare providers, for developing these skills, there's going to be one in this fall. I think I said, like, I'm a card carrying atheist or whatever, but I have developed a mindfulness practice, which I sort of think is it's a cognitive skill. Everyone knows that you're supposed to walk for 30 minutes a day and do these things to take care of your body. But how much time do we spend developing our brains, our minds, right? I mean, 5 minutes of meditation a day is sort of like doing your 5 minutes of Pilates or something. It's like how to get your mind to work in a better way. And that's the place to start. The more that practice lets you understand what's actually happening in front of you more. You can sort of sense what's happening in your body. You can engage much better. So, on an individual level, just getting the Headspace app and do it like, okay, 5 minutes in the morning before you get going, or 5 minutes at the end of the day, is really a great way to start cultivating the foundation to incorporate a lot of these things into your practice. I know it's hard in fellowship. You guys are like working all the time, but you can always just, shut the door for 5 minutes and lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes to do this. Did anything here strike a chord with people? Did people does any of this stuff come up in training for folks?
Sorry, my name is Andy. I'm one of the fellows. I think initially when I was listening, I guess I'm coming off a busy service, so I felt like some of this is a Band-Aid for, I guess currently at the moment I have a little resentment over how bloated our notes are and how much chart review there is and how they're not really helpful for me. And how like after this, I just have to go back to writing my notes.
Right.
But then, as the talk went on, I think it was a really helpful reminder, and like, it did start to change my mentality, and, like hopefully I can incorporate some mindfulness.
Well, it is a Band-Aid. I mean, it's the truth is, the EHR is just painful. It sucks. It's, this is like the Wright brothers airplane, right? And it's got to get better, right? It's painful. There's so much about it's painful, but anything is going to help you cope a little bit more, give you a little more resilience, engaging your patients more is a good thing. We use at Sutter this wheel that was developed at Stanford. When you look at physician well-being, there's personal resilience, which is this stuff, culture of wellness, which is a healthy culture, and the third important part is is efficiency of work, right? So you can't, if the EHR is down, you're going to have a terrible day, right? So all those things need to be there. So working on your well-being means pointing out errors, problems with workflows, and do it in a positive way. But like when there's bad workflows, people need to know about it. So you need to kind of think about those three components, right? Personal resilience, culture of wellness, which is sort of the institutional culture, and then efficiency at work. And keeping those and working on all three of those is really the way to kind of have a good professional fulfillment or joy at work.
I really appreciate just like reviewing all those things and having compassion with our patients. I think that'll be beneficial.
Well, it's I think that the more you can get out of the patient experience, the patient in this exam with the patient, the better it is. And the more you open up your heart and just be yourself, and just say, boy, this is scary, man, you must be scared, or this is frightening, or naming their emotions is really a helpful way to get things. We talk about this pain scale, but really it's the emotional component is often what gets people, in the unknown. And acknowledging their fears is just a great way to kind of get in there. And especially when we can't do things, it's like, how do you, there's compassion, right? But if you can't fix the problem, then how are you like moving? But just by acknowledging it can be a therapeutic act in itself. I may not figure out why you're having this chronic abdominal pain, but I understand it must make your life really a challenge. Really hard when people can't figure out what's wrong with you. You come to see the doctors and there's no answer. That's hard. That in itself can be therapeutic rather than, well, the workup has been negative and why don't you go see this other person, right? Because I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes in, is like, why am I seeing this person? I can't do anything about it.
Thanks, Leif. This is a really great talk, and it really drives home, I think, a lot of the importance of why many of us went into medicine, sort of stopping and thinking about the patient, and really brings the humanity back into it. One question I had, just playing off of Andy's really nice comment, is a lot of these things sometimes for us, you're in hospitalist medicine, very similar. I mean, it feels at odds. Like we need to take time to do this, but we're constantly sort of trying to balancing, rounding, putting in all our notes, doing all the billing, RVUs, and all these things. So I'm curious if you had any thoughts or tricks or how you approach this with leadership at Altabates, for example, to kind of emphasize the importance of this aspect of medicine.
Well, I guess what I would say is, write shittier notes sometimes, right? Because the work product is the patient, not the note, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the work product is the patient, right? How they feel and where they go from here. The other thing is, it's hard, especially in fellowship, if you're just working around the clock, right? Like spending an extra 5 minutes during the workday. But oftentimes, all you need to do is spend an extra 30 seconds with a couple patients. Right? It doesn't need to be a whole lot of time. And the more that you humanize the encounter in the beginning, you can actually end up saving time in the process, right? If you can build trust by sort of acknowledging things with them and feeling like you care, then you're not, there's less time later on to say, well, did you do this or did you do that? So it doesn't have to be a whole lot more time. But I think that, advocate for the things that that we need to take time. That patient experience matters, which means I need to spend a little more time talking to my patients. But it's exactly what we're at odds with. I totally agree with you. Like it's all about churning out its volume, right? And the procedures and getting them done. But I think the argument that can be made, though, that is, especially as you get to a place where you're at an institution, that losing a doctor can cost an institution, $500,000, right? Losing a nurse costs $250,000 for an institution. And so making sure that the culture supports a good, a healthy work environment, and that people feel like they can be their open-hearted, compassionate selves, it's good for the bottom line. That's that whole book, Compassionomics. So, you know, if you run into a guy in a corner office or a woman in a corner office who's telling you that to generate more RVUs, you could have her take a look at that book. That make the argument that that's how actually a good investment is to develop these skills in people, make that something that they spend time on. Okay, well, I appreciate talking to you guys, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks again, Dr. Haas.
All right, bye-bye.
Dr. Haas.
Any more questions? Still here? Is that it?
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Good evening.